Today, we're going to learn how to paint a moonlight reflection using acrylics step by step. I'll show you how to create a night sky and a moon with some clouds. And then we're going to add some trees, add our water, and then we're going to reflect our trees and our moon. This is a great beginner's tutorial and I hope you'll enjoy it. Now let's go over the materials and get started. For canvas, I'm going to use a 12 by 16 studio canvas. I just added a glaze of water to tighten the loose ends. Sometimes canvases come with loose ends and water. When you add a glaze of water and let it naturally dry, it tightens up everything and makes it nice and firm. For brushes, as always, I'm going to use 2 of my M1 blending brushes. And then this is a size smaller, we're going to use a M2 blending brush. We're going to use my 4-piece brush set here and I'll show you what's inside. We have the number 8 and number 4 brushes. I'm going to be using these a lot. 1/2 inch flat brush and a 0 detail brush. And then I'm going to use an artist sponge. They come in a pack, so this is like the bigger size, and they're all random. And I chose one that is smaller for my leaves and branches effect. And if you don't have anything like this, you could create a similar effect with your number 8 and number 4 brushes. For paint, I'm going to use my 24 set of acrylics and I'll show you which colors from this set. We'll keep it pretty simple, so we're not going to use a lot of colors, but we need medium yellow, viridian, phthalo blue, and lamb black. From my 5 set of acrylics, I'm going to use titanium white. We need a palette, and I'm going to use my palette paper here. And of course, a palette knife to mix your paint on. A jar of water and some paper towels to wipe your palette knife or dab your brushes onto or clean some paint on. And finally, if you have a hair dryer, go ahead and use that for the first parts. It basically speeds up the process of drying time. But if you don't, you can wait 20-30 minutes, but you do want to make sure the background is dry before continuing to the next part. You could use any materials you have available, but if you're interested in using what I have, visit ColorByFeliks.com for more details. And by the way, you could use any canvas you have available. If you are painting bigger, make sure to add a little more paint. If you're painting smaller, just add a little less. I will have a color mixing guide for you for those interested in knowing the exact amount of ratio I use for each color. If you're interested in downloading that, it'll be in the description down below. I'd encourage you to take breaks. I personally don't get this painting done in one day. I like to work in sections so that it won't be overwhelming and it can be fun. I like to start from the furthest distance from me, which is the sky, right? We're gonna add the blend of the sky, and then we're gonna add a moon, and then we're gonna add some clouds. That'll be the next thing. And then we're gonna add the faraway trees, get a little sketch of our river, first layer. And then we're gonna add closer trees, and then land and grass, and then detail everything. Keep in mind that things that are further away, they're gonna be more misty looking, more less in color, and not as contrasty. And that's how you create depth. So we're going to be using white to dim and make it softer, and also more of the black and more color when things are closer to us. So they're going to be more contrasty and more detailed. Now we're going to mix colors for our sky. And this is a quick process, the blending part. And it usually takes me about, between 3 to 6 minutes to get the blending part done. It's very fun and fast. And once you catch the technique, you can do a lot of cool blends and you could really have fun with it. So I'd also encourage you guys to just practice blending alone. The more you paint, the more you practice, the better you get without even realizing it. That's the best way to learn. I have my palette paper here and I'm going to start with titanium white, and we're going to create about 4 colors, and I'm going to squeeze in the corner here about 2 thumbs amount of white. And then each time a little less, because the sky is going to be dark. We don't want to, maybe thumb amount actually here, and then a little less here, and a small touch on the last one, because it's going to be a night scene, so we don't want to make the sky too bright. Always close your lid so that paint won't dry out. And then we're gonna add a little bit of Viridian, a little bit of this to the top, very small amount, maybe a little bit in here as well. And that's it, about the same amount. And then we're gonna close the lid and pick up phthalo blue, okay? And we're gonna add a small amount to this first one, very small amount, and then a little more to the second one, and each time go a little more. So this one, as you can see, has a lot more, and then we're gonna add more to the last one. And finally, we're gonna add a little bit of lamp black. We're gonna add that to the last one. Very small touch, not a lot. Okay, just a reminder, if you'd like to know exact amount of ratio, there's a color mixing guide to download for free in the link down below. So now we're gonna pick up our palette knife, and we're gonna start with the lightest color first. Okay, and we're gonna cover about maybe half the canvas, the top part of the canvas. So mix it, and once it's nicely mixed, we're gonna pile it up like this. Okay, and then next, it should start slowly transitioning to a darker blue, green. Okay, and then pile it up like this. And then next, as you can see, it's slowly starting to transition and get a little darker. That's what we want. When you have a nice smooth transition mixed of colors, it's easier to create smoother transitions and when you go on to painting and blending. There you go. And finally, our last color. And you could use ultramarine blue. It's also good for night paintings. But for this one, because of the river, I want to kind of keep it more on the green side, more on the green with the trees and grass. I want to keep it all similar in a way to make the painting more balanced. But you could totally use ultramarine blue as well. All right, so you could see we have these colors from lightest to darkest. I don't need to add any more. I like how they look. I'm gonna clean my palette knife. I'm gonna dab it all the way in the water jar, make it wet, and then wipe it off like this. And here are the colors I have. And if you get something like this, you'll be good to go. It does not have to look exactly like mine. But with these colors, we're gonna add the sky here. So I'm gonna zoom in the camera, and probably half of this, if a little bit of paint goes a little lower, that's okay. But we're gonna cover about this portion right here, this half. All right, let's pick up our M2 blending brush and a jar of water. And we're gonna dab it all the way. And with this first brush, we're gonna use a little bit of water and paint to lay out all our colors. And then we'll use a dry blending brush to blend. I'm gonna have a water jar next to me, and every time I'm saying I'm dabbing my brush in the water, I'm just going just a tip in the water like this to pick up more water if I need to, right? And water helps keep acrylics stay wet longer, which allows you and gives you more time to lay out all the paint you want. And then when you go into blending, it'll blend nicely and won't dry so fast. I tried, different kind of mediums to keep acrylics wet, and a lot of the times it's too sticky or it's not consistent, and I just never liked it. And the water keeps everything consistent and clean. All right, so let's start with a little bit of water. See, I don't have too much water, just a little bit. It's not like, if I squeeze, you're gonna see some water coming out. And I'll show you right here, watch. See? But it's not like a lot. So make sure, so I'm dabbing my brush again in the water and squeezing part of it out so I have some still. And I'm gonna pick up our first color right here. Okay, and this first color is gonna be where the moon is, the lightest, because we wanna create that glow around the moon. And the moon is going to be probably somewhere right here. This is like the middle of the canvas. It's probably going to be like 2 inches this way to the left, somewhere in here, I'm guessing. So I'm just going to start right about right there, and I'm going to create. And if you see bubbles, that's good. And I feel my paint and brush is running smooth on the canvas, and that's good. But if you see water dripping, that means you have too much water, and I'd encourage you to pick up more paint and just blend it and equalize it so it won't drip. But if you see bubbles, that's good. So I'm going to dab my brush in the water again, use the next color, and around this one, I'm going to start to add the next color. And it's okay if you cover a little bit of the first color. That's totally fine. So maybe the lighter color again, and it's okay. And I'm going a little lower than I need to, and that's fine. So I'm going to dab my brush in the water, and now I'm going to use the next color. And it's going to quickly start to be darker. This is a night scene, so the sky is going to be a darker blue. So I'm not adding too much of the lighter color. So I'm going to dab my brush slightly in the water, pick up some more paint, and I'm going to kind of bring the paint down, but not too much, to the colors I already added, as you can see. And swirl and bring it down. Okay? And finally, the last color. Actually, I'm going to use a little bit of this and add it right here. And then I'm going to dab my brush in water, use the darkest color to cover the rest of your canvas. Doing the same thing, swirl. And why I like to swirl, because it fills in the canvas. It has this texture, and it just kind of fills in all the cracks, and and it makes it more solid. So a little more paint and quickly lay it out. You could see I'm doing this in real time, so this is a quick process. And when I'm not teaching, this is a lot easier actually, because I'm just painting, getting comfortable. If you like your canvas to be flat, you can do that too. And quickly lay it out, get all the paint in as best as you can. And then I'm going to quickly put my blending brush in the water jar, leave it there, and then pick up one of my dry blending brushes and start from the lightest area, gently swirling and taking away the brush strokes. Okay. And it's okay if you bring the paint a little bit down. Just take your time to blend it. Take away all the brush strokes. As you can see, it's working nicely, and it's creating that smooth transition. Sometimes when I have paint left, like I do now, I'll even do this again if I want to. You don't have to. If you like your first blend, you don't have to do it again. But I like to sometimes create another blend, and it makes it even more cleaner and softer and solid. There you go. Nice smooth blend. Don't press too hard. From lightest to darkest. Swirl gently and blend. So now I'm going to let this dry and clean out my brushes, and then we'll continue to the next part. Alright, the background is dry. I got a new water and my brushes are clean. And I'm going to put my number 4 and number 8 brushes in the water, let it sit for a few minutes while I mix colors. They'll become nice and soft, which helps with blending and creating smoother transitions. Alright, so I have a little bit of white straight out of the tube, and then less white each time. A small amount there and a smaller amount on this one. And then I added Viridian, black, lamp black, and phthalo blue. And then here I added the same amount of Viridian, more phthalo blue, and more lamp black. And here we are. So this is going to be I'm going to add the moon, and then we just have two colors. We're going to keep it simple. This is for our clouds. I'm going to zoom in the camera, but before I do, I want to show you so you can see it where I add the moon. So this is the middle of the canvas, right? Right here. And I'm going to actually add the moon a little higher, probably like right here. Okay? Somewhere in here. So I'm going to take up my number 4 brush, to tap it on the paper towel, and a little bit of white. And I'm going to add the moon somewhere to the left side. Okay, it's going to be reflecting right here, so I'm going to have it a little higher, probably like right here. And you can make it as big as you want. So I'm going to make it a little bigger with white and a little bit of water. That's good right there. So that is where our moon is going to be. I'm going to let this dry. This is the first layer, so it looks rough. While this dries, I'm going to pick up my detail brush, dab it in the water, and with titanium white by itself and some water and white, right? We're going to swirl it like this and make sure our edges are nice and clean and our moon is more of a cleaner circle. And just eyeball it, you know. There's different ways of painting a moon or circles, whatever is easiest for you. But that's how I do it. I usually just use my number 4 brush and quickly fill it in, and then with my detail brush around the edges, I just make it a little more round and take away the sharp, make it more cleaner. Okay. So I'm gonna do that real quick here and let this dry. And real quick, just to create a little bit more interesting look to our moon, I'm going to use a little bit of white and this color, mix those randomly together, and let's add, you know, how there's some shadows and little details inside our moon. Let's add those so that it won't just be all white. Now I'm going to clean my detail brush and put it down flat. I never leave my detail brush in a water jar because that'll damage the tip, so I just quickly clean it and put it flat on a paper towel. And same thing with my flat brushes. The only brushes I leave in the water jar are my number 4 and number 8 brushes. So with my number 4 brush, we're going to quickly sketch out our placements of our clouds now that we know where the moon is at, right? So I'm going to use this color with a little bit of water, and I'm going to start to add some clouds. So maybe there will be some I'm going to dab my brush in water, tap it on the paper towel, pick up more paint. I do this often because it helps blend and run smooth on the canvas when I have some water in here. So something like this. I'm not going to add too much. I'm going to keep my sky pretty open here, but I want to add a little bit so that it'll look interesting. Okay, just with that color, I'm going to go up. Randomly add some in here. And as I go up, I'm going to quickly switch to my number 8 brush because it's bigger. I'm going to use a little bit of this color, mix it with this darkest. And we're going to create a transition so that it won't be super flat and that's why I'm adding that lighter color. I'm going to create a smoother transition. So a little more of this lighter color and mix those randomly together. Okay, a little bit more of the darker color as you go out, and this one's gonna be going up to the top a little bit and blending out, and it's gonna, as you can see, it's kind of hard to tell because it's blending in with the background sky, which is good. We want it to be not too intense for our clouds. Okay, something like this. Continue on with the same technique, a little bit of this color and this one, and we're gonna add another cloud. Maybe there's a cloud here connecting. And it could be random. It does not have to look like mine. There's going to be some trees here, so I'm not going to go in too much. I just want it a little bit around the moon to make it look a little more interesting. So I'm going to switch back to my number 4 brush, and I'm going to add a little bit more of this color. I want to add a little bit. Here, I'm going to add some lighter clouds. Make it faded. I'm going to use a little bit more white so it won't be too crazy. I want to make it look faded. Go back to this color again. A little bit more of this color. And fade it out. Now I'm going to quickly add a little bit of white, and I'll show you what I'm going to do real quick. And I'm going to take part of this color so that it won't go to waste, and mix it with the white. Get another lighter color, something like this, okay? And we're gonna create some lighter highlights around what we added so we can see it a little cleaner. So just this by itself, this lighter color, and we're gonna add some lighter highlights. Right underneath. Your cloud here. Okay, continue on gently around the little clouds here. I'm going to dab my brush slightly in water, tap it on the paper towel, use that color again, continue. Add in your lighter highlights. And this first layer is usually rough looking. We just are adding our placements first, and then when I add the second layer going over with the similar colors or the same colors, it'll look a little softer and more cleaner look. I'm going to dab my brush slightly in the water. And it's going to get brighter as it gets closer to the sun, so keep that in mind. We will go over the brighter area once more. Dab my brush slightly in water, and with your damp brush, we're going to just fade it out. Okay, so now that you have your shapes of your clouds, we're not going to add too much. That's all we're going to add, because again, there's going to be some trees. It's going to be covering part of the sky here, so we don't want to overdo it. So from here, I'm going to dab my brush in the water and add a little bit of a lighter color. So I'm going to use white and mix it with a little bit of this color, but not too much. Okay, and right next to the moon, because that's where it's going to be the brightest, we're going to add that brighter highlight to our cloud here. The lighter color, because the glow, it's closer to that glow, right? And as it goes out, it's going to be a little more dimmer and darker. That's the goal. So a little more. Okay, so now I'm going to add a glaze before I continue. It is dry. This is a good sketch, first layers. Now I'm going to clean my brush, and with the white, by itself and some water. I'm going to add a transparent glaze around the moon. Now that the moon is dry, we're going to want to create that glow around the moon, right? So as you could see, when I start to add a little bit more white around the moon, it creates that nice glow. And of course, we are going to blend it out, and it's going to be less bright. So it'll be a few layers like this, what I'm doing, because I really want it to stand out. As you expand, I'm going to use number 8 brush with a little bit of water and white by itself. We're going to continue the glaze. Make it even more. And because you have water, it doesn't paint everything, it just adds a small layer of that white. It doesn't, you're not overdoing it, you're just moving a little bit of that white paint around. That's what we're doing here. This is a small detail, but it makes a big difference. Use a little more white. And add it around the sun, the moon. And I'm not pressing too hard. Another brush that works pretty good for this, I could have used as well, is my M3 blending brush. It's a smallest blending brush, and you use a little bit of white, same technique, and you just swirl it, and it makes it a soft transition. I could have used that for this part, but that's okay. It still looks rough. You could still see a lot of, sharpness and brush strokes, but that is why it's important to let it dry and add another layer. So acrylics is all about layering. So I'm going to let this dry, and then we're going to create another layer. Okay, so now that it's dry, I'm going to use my detail brush and a little bit of water, and we're going to start to make it even cleaner and brighter. For example, first start around the moon, okay, with water and white by itself, because we want our moon to be the brightest and create a very bright glow. So we're adding another layer to the moon, mainly around, and skip some areas because we want a little bit of the shadows in there. Okay, and then after that, we're going to use more water. So I dab my brush in water and then use a little bit of white, and I'm going to add a glow, a lighter glow for the little parts around the moon with just white and water. You see how that works nicely? Okay. And I'm going to work around, move the paint so it won't be too sharp. So I'm going to dab my brush lightly in the water again and keep moving the paint. you want to fade it out, create a fade. So a little bit more of water and paint. More water though. So while that dries, I'm gonna repeat the process real quick with my number 4 brush in a little bit of this darker color, and I'm gonna go over and try to add inside maybe a little bit lighter, make it a little bit of a softer transition to the dark. Same thing here. So a little bit more of this color and the darkest. And of course, as you go out, we're going to use more of the darker one. And then here you can start to add a little bit more of, for example, this color and this color we have mixed. Go inside this cloud and kind of add a little bit of thicker and smoother, brighter highlights. Okay, so a little bit of this color in this one around right here. Okay, same thing on this side of the cloud. Trying to make it softer looking. See how that second layer, when you add it, see how soft that looks, right? Just take your time. On these parts, and so a little bit more of this color, and then we're going to go back, and with the brighter color we're going to go over it again, where we want the brightest highlights to be, right? And we're going to do kind of the same thing, but with our detail brush to the brighter highlights. So and your clouds could look different than mine. All right, so now we're gonna go with our detail brush and with white, maybe a little bit of this color, but more white. Okay, like this. And right next to the sun, before we add another layer to the sun, I'm just gonna add another layer to the clouds here. I'm gonna start to add the brightest highlights. Dab my brush in water, pick up more paint. You could even separate some of these. Right? So, same idea, a little bit of white and this color. Right on the edge of your clouds. You can connect these together, why not? And we are adding a little bit more details, as you could see, which makes our clouds pop more. And this lighter color is more next to the moon, mainly to the around the moon area, and then it fades out. So dab my brush in the water, pick up more of the lighter color. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to add a little more of the lighter highlights around some of these clouds here, right? Try to make it cleaner and faded. And then once I'm done, I'll show you what I get. But mainly, so a little more on in here, and I'm going to call it good here. And if you don't like something, it's easy to repaint and fix. You know, I like to step back and take a look at the progress so far and see if I need to adjust, or it's very easy to do that. So don't worry about, you know, making mistakes. Sometimes it works for your benefit. Okay? For example, here, do I like that? Not liking that so much. I like it more solid, so I'm going to make this solid. So I'm going to use a little bit of this color, clean it up a bit, and that's okay. Maybe add a little bit of that lighter color right in here inside my cloud. And then use this color and maybe this one. And we're gonna add a little bit even lighter color. So that it won't look flat. You'll have like 3D look to it. And then here I'm going to add some more clouds so that I won't look. So use the darkest color. It'll look like it's separating, right? And finally, with a detail brush, we're going to just use white and some water, and we're going to add the brightest highlights on the bottom of some of these clouds. And it's going to fade. Okay, around. Even in here, a little brighter ones. And that's pretty much the final step for our sky and moon and clouds. And you can add as many layers as you want, making it softer, cleaner. You know, I'm actually going to repeat the process one more time so that I can have even a smoother transition on some of my, you know, glow here. So, but you do want to keep, the goal is once you're done adding, you don't want to overwork an area. Once you're done adding that quick layer and you're somewhat happy with it, let it dry before adding another layer. So now that it's dry, you know, in the meantime, you can work on these highlights and different parts, right? But now that it's dry, right, I'm going to go back and repeat the process on adding a very light glaze of white, you know, as the final layer to make it even more softer and brighter. So with my number 8 brush and a little bit of paint, not too much, more water, you add the glaze where you think you want it to be softer looking. For example, right here. And then you just fade it out gently. And that's how you create a soft glow transition. And it's okay if you go over and glaze over your clouds. That's actually good. because you know you want your clouds to be like light in the middle and then going into darker colors. If you've been enjoying this lesson so far and want to help support this channel, check out my Patreon. It's a great way to be a part of the creative process and help keep these tutorials ad-free and accessible to everyone. Inside Patreon, you'll get access to high-res reference photos, commercial-free versions of my YouTube lessons, behind-the-scenes content, and you can even help me vote on future painting topics. It's a small way to support this free content, but it makes a big difference. Thank you to everyone who supported me over the years. I appreciate you all. Now let's get back to painting. And this is how it looks so far. Let's continue and paint our faraway trees, and then the closer trees, and then a sketch of the river. And we're gonna mix some colors for the faraway trees. Let's start there. And so this is what I have. I have a thumb amount of white here, and then a little bit Viridian and Phthalo blue. And then here, less white, more Viridian, and a little more Phthalo blue, and a touch of lamp black. And then here, even less white than this one. And then we have more Viridian and more Phthalo blue and more lamp black. So as I was mixing this, I realized it's kind of too light for my trees compared to the background. I want it to be darker than the background, but not too dark, right? So that is why I kind of looked at it and it's too light. So I actually added lamp black to darken the color and make it more like neutral, darker tone. And so I added a little more there and a little more here. And it's much better. You could see adding that made it look a little more darker and in the gray tones, which we want because these trees that we're going to paint are further back. And then when we add closer trees up here, that's why I left this open, because a lot of it's going to be covered by trees and details to them, right? Branches and things like that. So the ones that are closer are going to be more contrasty. So we're going to add more color and darker. But this is perfect right here. So something like this and you'll be good to go. So let's start, and I'm going to show you the whole canvas so you can see where I start adding it, but then I'm going to zoom in for the detail part. But basically I'm going to use my number 8 brush. I'm going to tap it on the paper towel. It's nice and damp. And we're going to start with the lightest color. And so you guys can see, this is the middle of the canvas right here, right? Somewhere right in here. We're going to have the river start somewhere in the middle, somewhere right here, you know, a little half an inch down from the middle. That's where the river will be. And there will be some land here. And I'm just gonna eyeball it for now, and obviously we'll correct it, and there will be a little land right in here. And I'm just doing this to make it easier for me later. But this part will be a little land, and there'll be some trees here. So something like this. And this part will be all river, and there's going to be some land, and then it's going to fade away probably somewhere in here like this. Okay, so because this is where the river begins and it's going to go down right in here, we're going to have a reflection of the moon right in here. But I'm going to start by adding this color right next to where the moon is. I'm going to start to add my faraway trees. I'm going to make them small first, maybe about 2.5 inches, like this. And you can skip some areas. There's no right way of doing this. Make it smaller. You could even make it bigger if you want. And just bring it down. Bring it down all the way. And because my brush has water, it runs pretty nice and smooth. And I'm going to just let it fade out like this. There'll be some bigger trees as we get closer. These are more faded, so that's good right there. And you can randomly kind of let it fade. Okay, so now I'm going to actually make this one a little bigger, just because I think I don't want it to look all the same here. I'm going to make it a little higher and like this. All right, so now I'm going to zoom in the camera so you can see the details and how I paint the rest of the trees. But this is just to give you an idea where I place my trees first. So I'm going to add a little bit of phthalo blue in white, and I'm going to take part of this color, about this much, and mix it with this. I want it to lean towards a little more blue and make it a little lighter. So I think I added too much blue, so it's okay. What I'm going to do is add a little more white. I'm going to take part of this, just maybe, you can wipe it on a paper towel as well, but this works too. And so with this lighter blue color, right, we want it to be a little lighter than that one. I'm going to mix it in right here. So I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to clean my number 8 brush, tap it on the paper towel, and get most of the water out. And with this color, right, something like this, want it to be a little lighter than this one and leaning more towards the blue color. And I want to kind of add some mist on the bottom right here so it could look faded. So I'm going to swirl and create a little bit of that lighter blue to my trees, especially on the bottom here. Like I said, I'm going to add bigger trees, but this is just the first kind of part that I want to add, mainly on the bottom here, because it's going to be misty by the river, right? And as you go up, obviously it's going to turn into the color we just added, like this. We don't want to go too high. You see how that transition is nice? That greenish color, gray-green, going into this lighter blue a little bit. You see, that's what we want. We want to make it look misty on the bottom by the river. So something like this, okay? That's good enough for now. We can always add a little more later. So now I'm going to continue. I'm going to continue with adding the next color, which is this one, the middle one. Doing the same technique first. And let's start with this one. Let's add a bigger tree in here, maybe even taller, like this. And you can kind of use the corner of your brush and lightly dab it. And this one's gonna have a little more detail, but not that much, but just a little bit, like this. And then we're gonna bring it down and let it probably go down like this. Okay. And this area is going to be pretty dark, so let's use a little bit of this green. So a lot of it will look very just simple. We're not going to add too much details, but I'm going to add a little bit of this color inside here, and then go back to this color, and then go back to this, well, this one. Yeah, let's keep using this one. And we're going to make it even taller here, another tree, but even taller. Maybe about this high. Okay. And we're just going to add it and mix it all in. This is going to be a very dark area here. So with this color, we're going to continue. And there will be a couple bigger trees right in here. So I'm just going to fade this out real quick. Randomly like this. You can bring it down a bit. And then as I go in a little bit, I'm going to use a little of darker tone, this one right here that we mixed, mainly on the bottom around here. Not too much, we still want it to be more on the green side. So here, I'm gonna just bring it down and cover it like this as the first base. Okay, so before we continue adding anything more, let's continue on this side. So on this side, let's go back to this color, maybe mix it a little bit with this one. So we'll get a in between, and we're gonna start to transition to maybe even use a little more so it won't be too dark. Make it a little taller, but not too tall. And we're gonna start to maybe more lighter. A little darker on the bottom. And there will be like a land here. And we're gonna make it nicer for the where the land and all that meets. We're gonna do that nicely with, again, I'm just focusing on the trees first. So let's focus here using this color. I'm going to dab my brush in the water, tap it on the paper towel, continue with this color. And randomly cover this section. I wanted to go a little higher here, so I'm going to actually add a little bit of a higher tree in here, about this big. Okay, a little more. And even higher. So I'm going to go skip some areas and make it even higher right here. And as I go in more into the right, I'm going to actually use the dark nail. So you can see it a little better, right? It's away from the light. And we're going to fade it out. So dab my brush in water, tap it on the paper towel, and continue with the darkest color. And as you go down, mix it with this color, okay? So it could be blended, so maybe a little more darker on this side, on the right side, and then go back to this one. And just mix it all in randomly. Alright, so I'm going to switch my brush to number 4, and I'm going to actually darken some of these parts so this won't be too far away. I'm going to make it a little closer to us by adding a little bit of this color, maybe mix it with this one, get an in-between shade, and on top here I'm going to add this gently with a damp brush, just on top right here on some of these trees, and then I'm going to let it fade down. So I'm going to use a little bit blue, mix it with this color, maybe a little more blue, this lighter blue color. And the goal is to create a fade. Okay, this is going to be all misty looking, but we want it to look a little closer to us like this. Okay, so now I'm going to repeat the process, doing the same thing with my number 4 or number 8 brush. Add these trees real quick just to create it, make it a little more cleaner and softer looking. I'm going to real quickly, with water, I'm going to glaze some paint. This is a quick process right here, not too much, and make sure I make it look even more. Take away all the brush strokes, right? So I'm going to use this color, do the same thing on this side with water, not too much paint. It just fills in all the little, cracks that we missed and makes it look a little more soft, like I mentioned. Real quick. So once you're done with that, we're gonna mix some color real quick to create a first layer of our river. All right, you could see how soft and solid it looks because of the second layer. One thing I want to add real quick to show you, I want to add, like we did mist right here, I want to add some in here so that there could be some separation between these trees. So what I'm going to do is use a little bit of this light blue and this color. Okay, and I'm going to add some separations, for example, right here, right where this tree is. I'm going to add a little mist. Maybe in here. Actually, that one, I'm not very happy about that one. That's okay, but this one is good right here. A little mist in here, and then in this tree right here, we're going to add that mist. A little bit of a lighter separation, and then it's going to obviously be faded. There will be some bigger trees here. I kind of started doing the same thing on this side. You could see that mist, just with a little bit of color and a damp brush. Maybe in here. Okay, very small amount, not too much. And something that you don't like, you can go back and cover it up. For example, this part, right? Okay, we're gonna do the base of our water here, and similar like we did with the sky, I'm gonna add a thumb amount of white here, and I'm only gonna do 3 colors though, and then a little bit less white here and half a thumb amount here of white, and then you could see a small touch of Viridian and Phthalo Blue, more Viridian and Phthalo Blue here, and then a lot more here like a thumb amount and Phthalo Blue, and a little bit less of Lamb Black here. So I did add a little more Phthalo Blue here and Lamb Black because it was leaning a little bit towards green too much, which is fine. So I added a little bit more of that to make it lean towards blue more. Alright, so as you can see, now it's more on the blue side, which we want. Okay, I did add a little bit of Phthalo Blue on this one as well. so that the transition will be a little smoother from the lighter kind of green turquoise color going into a bluish gray color. And phthalo blue is leaning towards green too, so they're very good. They work very good together, Viridian and phthalo blue. So let's pick up our M2 blending brush, like we did with the sky. I'm going to dab it all the way in the water, squeeze part of it out, and quickly start from where the lightest area is going to be. So we're going to pick up our lightest color real quick, like this, all right? And this is where the reflection will be. So this is where the brightest area will be. And you can bring it down and okay, I'm going to dab my brush slightly in the water and then use the next color, this one. And it's okay if you cover your a little bit of your land that we sketched out. That's totally fine. Okay, and dab it in the water lightly, and we're gonna add it a little bit in here, this color. Okay, a little more. Okay, and as you go in, we're gonna finally use the darkest color and mix it in. We could even go all the way to that, cover the top, just to cover the canvas, why not? So dab in the water, pick up more of this color, and let's just cover it, why not? We're gonna obviously add more layers to the land, but something like this, okay? Real quick. So a little more darker area in here. Okay, that's good enough for now. All right, so now with the dry M1 blending brush, we're gonna go and blend everything in. And this time we're gonna swirl it in the middle, right? Gonna swirl it, and then from here, we're just gonna go like this. Randomly go like this, and because it's all gonna be reflecting in, we're gonna add a lot of details in reflection. And here's how it looks so far. I did repeat the process again because I had some paint left over, but if you're happy with your first layer of water, then leave it as it is. And obviously we're going to be adding reflections and details, but this is the base. And quickly with my number 4 brush and titanium white, I'm going to just get an idea of where the reflection will be so that it'll be easy to kind of continue detailing everything. So we're going to have the moon go straight down, and there will be a reflection starting somewhere in here. I'm going to skip some areas. And just kind of go zigzag and skip again and let it fade out. Something like this. Obviously we'll go back and add even more details later, but this is just to give us an idea. Okay. Maybe even make it a little bigger because the moon is bigger. Alright, so now let's work on the land, where we want the land to be, and quickly lay it out. And then from there, we're gonna start to detail and work on our shadows. And then we're gonna add the bigger trees later. But this is what I have. A thumb amount of white, Viridian, small amount, and a touch of lamp black and phthalo blue. And then more Viridian here, and then phthalo blue, less of that. And then a little more lamp black, less white here, more Viridian the most, phthalo blue, and lamp black. So I decided to actually start to add a little bit of brighter color for our grass. And so I added medium yellow, a small touch of that right on the first one. And finally, I did add a little bit of lamp black, okay, and the same amount of phthalo blue and Viridian to this one, because I want to create a little bit of a darker color than that one. So it's leaning towards like a dark green color, right? So something like this and you'll be good to go. All right, let's pick up our number 4 brush, and we're gonna start with adding our darkest, one of the darker color, this one. Maybe mix it in with the darkest. Okay, and with this color, we're gonna create the river, right? Remember the river? We're gonna create some land, faraway land. Continue with that color. A little bit of this and the darkest. We're gonna have this one. Come down here. So I'm going to use the darkest color now by itself. And bring it down. There will be another little grassy area here. With just the darkest color first. We're just getting a sketch. Adding our shadows, darkest shadows first. And then we'll adjust everything later. I'm going to use a little bit of this green color real quick. This one, and fill it in right in here. There'll be some reflections of this tree. So, and then it's going to be covered by land here. Grass and things like that. But I wanted to cover this section real quick. Go back to the darkest color. And now we're going to start to add our next land. So we're going to have the land probably end right in here, because I want to leave room for some reflections to make my painting look interesting. So I'm going to have it go up a little bit. So I'm guessing it's going to be somewhere in here. There'll be little rocks. Maybe bringing it a little more in. Maybe some bigger rocks right in here. And before I continue, I'm going to quickly fill in. I'm going to add a little bit more yellow to the first one because I want it to be a little more green. So for this one, it's still leaning towards like a blue color. So I added yellow, and I'm going to take part of this just in case I might use this for the further away, but I want to make it even more green. So I added more medium yellow real quick. This is much better, this green right here. Okay, so it's still like a bluish green. It's not too strong, but it's definitely leaning towards a grass color, nice grass shade. So I'm going to use this color real quick to add some lighter highlights, for example, right in here, right? I'm going to just randomly add the grass, and you can make it as tall as you wish. I'm going to skip some areas. We're going to obviously add some darker shadows. But randomly add it like this. And then because of the sunlight, right, we want it to reflect. And I'm going to bring this up a little bit. Maybe there's some bushes and things that are... And now I'm going to start to mix it with a little bit of a darker color. Still that green, but it's going to transition to a little more faded green. And I'm going to randomly kind of create some bushes, far away bushes, and little details up in here. I know it still looks random, but you'll see once we start to add some of our trees here. Let's use the darker color here. Closer trees here, you'll start to see the image a little better. So we can use a little bit of the darker color in here, a little more shadows. Okay, go back to the greenish shade and randomly add some grass effects, some highlights. And we're going to come back to detailing, of course, later, but we just get in the first layers down. Okay, and I'm going to do that on this side with a lighter green. Okay, I'm going to randomly add some grass in here. And then as it goes up, it's going to get a little less intense. And we're going to fade it. Use a little bit of a darker. Okay, I'm going to switch my brush to number 4 for the smaller areas. And for example, I'm going to use a little bit of this green and more of this one. Mix those two, and it's still going to have some, actually, let's use a little bit of a darker color. I don't want it to stand out too much, but I want to add far away land right here and in here as well. So this color, maybe a little bit of green, not too much. Lighter green, I mean. Okay, we can also add a little bit of that in here, take away the darkness a little bit of the far away land. Maybe make it a little darker, a little bit, not too much. And now with your number 4 brush and that green color with a little bit of water, we can create a little bit of grass details and highlights and let it naturally. And we don't want to overdo it, but just a few areas like that. A little bit of that green here, just a little hint, and then we could use this, remember this light color? Could use that color to create a little bit of highlights to our rocks, just to get an idea. Mix it with a little bit of green actually. For example, this rock, remember? Let's add that highlight on the rock here, so we know. This one as well, randomly. Right, I'm just adding, looking at where the light is hitting and creating my rocks. Maybe there's another little rock in here somewhere. A brighter highlight. And you can use the darkest color to add. Right, and you can add as many of those as you wish. We can add one right in here, and then go back to the darkest color. Right, you get the idea. Okay. And a little bit more of that, maybe as it goes in, we're going to use this color. We're going to have a little bit of flatter rocks here. Right, create variety. I'm going to continue, and I can always come back and add another layer and detail everything, right? But for now, I'm gonna place my final trees, and this is just to give me an idea of all the things I need to add to this painting before I start to really go into detailing and finalizing the water, the details of everything, the trees. Okay, so I'm going to use this darkest color as a quick layer, and so with my flat brush I dab it in the water. I'm going to use this darkest color right here with some water, and I'm going to have a couple trees in here, and they're going to go probably close to the clouds right here. I'm guessing it's going to go starting from here. It's going to go all the way like this. Okay, so one right there, and then maybe there's another tree next to it. Just with water and your flat brush. Okay, and remember that it's thicker on the bottom, and as you go up, make it thinner. And we can adjust and correct later, but we're just placing it and getting an idea. So I'm going to continue and add my closer trees up here. Okay, so for example, I'm going to have the biggest tree be somewhere right in here, starting in here. And I want it to bend and go all the way this way. So I'm going to go like this. I'm going to pick up more paint and water. And it bends like this. So when I'm pressing, right, it makes it look thicker here. Because these are closer trees, they're going to be the biggest ones and thicker. Right, go all the way to the top. Don't be afraid to do this. That's why we left that area as it is. We didn't add too much of details, but I'm going to make it thicker. And as I go down, it's going to be even more bigger. And like I said, we can correct later, but I'm showing you guys and giving you an idea. And it does not have to be perfect. You know how trees are. They're not perfectly made or straight. They always have interesting shapes to them. Okay, something like this. Remember, thin on top and a little thicker on the bottom. Okay, I'm going to make it a little bit here, go like this. Okay, and there'll be another tree next to it. Another one. And this one's gonna kind of be straight. I'm gonna have it go like this. It's not super straight up, but it bends a little towards the top. Maybe this one's even thicker. Okay, I'll make this one a little thicker than that one. And just fill it in. Okay, something like that. And you could add one more. I'm going to add one more behind this tree. There's going to be a skinny one. And this one's going to just kind of go like this, okay? All right, so I'm gonna reflect that in my water right here. So I'm gonna just eyeball it, and you see how it curves here? So it's gonna curve right in here. For example, it's gonna go, and I'm trying to keep this similar here, right? Gonna go reflect, and it's not gonna be perfect. You know, because the water is moving. And randomly fill that in real quick. This is just to give us an idea. But you see the reflection now happening, and then this next to it, this tree. And then finally, this biggest one. Okay, I'm gonna kind of do the same thing on this one. And you see how this is at an angle, so kind of go at an angle too. And let it fade out. We're gonna work on the reflection here, but just get the starting. And this one as well. I'm using the corner of my brush and just letting it fade. Okay, now we got the idea down. So I'm gonna also draw some branches here. A branch right in here. And you can use your detail brush for this part as well, if that makes it easier for you. So I'm gonna add another branch in here. And I'm only adding the bigger ones, and then obviously I'm gonna, with my detail brush, add the smaller ones. I'm just getting the main branches added. So there's gonna be another branch in here. Okay, and then of course, on this side. Couple little branches here. And then the rest, obviously, we're going to be adding more details with an artist sponge. All right, let's continue adding some leaves and the first layers of that. And these are the colors I added. So I added thumb amount of white, a little bit of viridian and medium yellow, less white here, obviously more viridian and more medium yellow, and lamp black, small amount, less white, more viridian, more medium yellow, and more lamp black. And finally, I did add phthalo blue and lamp black to create a darker color. So I'm going to take part of this darkest green and mix it in with this. Now I'm going to pick up my artist sponge, dab it all the way in the water, make sure it's nice and soft, and then squeeze all the water out. We don't want any water. We just want it to be nice and soft. Okay? So first, we're going to start with the darkest color, this one. And we're going to choose a corner we like. I chose this side right here. And I'm going to take a little bit of paint, and you could test it right here. You don't want too much, but you could see you have a nice amount of the dark color, like this. All right. And with this darker color, we're going to start to add some leaves and things like that. And for example, right in here, right? I'm gonna start to gently add a little bit, not too much here, right next to the branches, and then in here as well. And you can make it smaller, and I'm just barely pressing. I don't want to overdo it. So something like this. Okay, start small, you can always add more later. We don't want to cover too much of the background. Okay, and then a little bit on this side. Okay, continue on. This area is going to be pretty covered with leaves and faded details. At least right in here. Since we don't have no clouds there showing, I want to gently cover it with a little bit of leaves in the back here. Continue on with the darkest color. Okay, maybe that's good enough there. All right. Some little ones in here. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing on that side. I'm going to add some little details of branches and things like that with the darkest color first. And then let it fade out. Maybe there's some little details in here. All right, so that first layer is done. Okay, that's good enough. And now we can go to the green color, the next lightest color, and add a little bit of green next to the, and you can just go over it, over some of these. I wouldn't want to overdo it, but just to create some highlights of green. green leaves. Mainly, I want to add that mainly where the glow is. And on this side. Okay. And now I'm going to add the next color, green. And I don't need to clean my artist sponge. And add even brighter highlights. Gently pressing, not too much. And if you overdid it, you can always paint with a darker color over it again. Okay. And we can go back to the darker green and create a little bit overlay of some of these on top of the over the trees right here. Maybe some bushes are coming towards us. Not too much, just a few. Okay, so do the same thing, lighter color, green, and let's add that on this side. And you can move it around, I'm just showing you. Sometimes when I'm recording it's awkward, but the angles. But you get the idea, right? When light hits more on the left side of the tree, so I'm adding more highlights on the left. And I'm not overdoing it, I'm just skipping some areas. Right? And then on the right side of this tree. Okay, and we'll work on detailing all that later, but right now what I'm gonna do is actually add some highlights real quick with my number 4 brush to our tree, and I'll show you. For example, this, let's use this color, right, and a little bit of the lighter color, this one. So this one and this green lettuce color. And we're gonna, on the right side or left side of this tree, we're gonna add our brightest highlights. And actually, let's use our flat brush for this part. It'll be more cleaner. So a little bit of this color and this green. Just mix those randomly together. And we're gonna add a little bit more brighter highlights. Right, something like this. Okay, same thing on this side of the tree. and on this one. And now, before I detail and go back and make it cleaner with a detail brush, I'm going to add some more branches. So with this color, right, and my detail brush and some water, I'm going to add some smaller branches, connect some of these, and make it look a little more nicer and detailed. For example, right here, attach some of these, right? And same thing on this side. You can add a little more, little smaller branches that you don't see. You can barely see maybe. Right, so take your time, make it cleaner. For example, right here, right? Okay, I can always come back to adding the branches later, but you get the idea. You can add as many as you want. And now I'm gonna, with my number 4 brush, use the lightest color, this one. Okay, and create my lightest highlight right in here by dabbing. Because of the moonlight, I want to create that glow. And let it fade out, but mainly right here. I'm going to actually use this green. That one's a little too light. So just a little bit of a green, more green tone. And then as you go in a little bit, it could be a little darker green because we want to create a little transition, right? Okay, clean my brush and add a little bit of the green, this green. Okay, and then we're going to go back to the lightest color, green. And then here, I'm going to add that lighter highlight over some of these. And you can also use your artist sponge for this part as well. If you wanted to, if you like the effect of it. I'm just adding a little bit of lighter highlights to some of these, where I think needs it most. If you're loving this tutorial and you're ready to go deeper with your painting, I'd love to invite you to my mentorship program. This is where I teach my most in-depth lessons, the ones I don't share anywhere else. Inside the mentorship, you'll get access to exclusive full-length tutorials, personalized feedback on your paintings from me, live Q&A calls where you can connect and ask questions, monthly painting challenges, giveaways, and more. This is my inner circle of artists who are serious about growing their skills. It's been amazing to see the progress our members make, and I'd love for you to join us. If you're interested, there'll be a link in the screen or also in the description down below. All right, let's get back to painting. All right, so I'm going to quickly reflect some of this to the bottom here, and obviously we're going to add more layers and make it a little nicer and cleaner. But with our number 4 brush, let's add a few details that we already know and added. For example, let's add a lighter green, maybe this one, maybe a little bit of this. And right here, we're going to add that light highlight. A little bit of it, not too much. I'm going to add it right here because it's reflecting, right? We want to reflect that. Maybe use a little more of this color. And fade it out. Same thing here. Real quick, reflect that. This is the water, and it does not have to be perfect, but as long as you kind of get that some of it to reflect, you're going to be good. It's going to look more, cleaner or realistic. So let's start to reflect some of the darker shadows of our trees and things like that. So I still have these colors, remember? So what I'm going to do is actually use this green color with a little bit of water, this one, remember? With some water, and I'm going to start to really reflect some of these trees and make some of this darker. So I'm going to add that in here. I'm going to dab my brush lightly in the water, and I'm going to use a little bit actually of this dark color, and let's use this lighter color. I want it to be more on the gray side, not as much green, at least for this part. So a little more lighter. Okay, something in between this one and this one. Okay, randomly. I'm taking away a little bit of the blue. Okay, some of this is going to be, we're going to add another layer of lighter highlights, but we want it to be a little darker because the reflection of our trees hitting the water. So this is going to be a darker area. Okay. So I'm going to use a little bit more on the gray side. Start to add a little more details in my water here. I'm going to switch my brush to number 8 so that I can cover a bigger area. And I'm going to use a little bit of a darker color here. Let's mix it with this. Okay, something like this. And we're going to reflect that. Actually use a little bit more of a darker color. I know I'm going back and forth, but I'm just trying to get a little bit of a darker color than the base layer that we added. So now we can use a little bit of this color and a little bit of a darkest color again. Because of our trees here, it's going to be all pretty dark in here. Okay, and I know it's, you know, the first layers are always like look rough, but you'll see once we start to add a little more and it's going to really stand out. Same thing here, I'm going to reflect some of these rocks and the land, right? So it won't look flat and unfinished. So with the darkest color, I'm going to reflect some of these rocks. And even go over the trees, the reflection of our trees. This area is going to be very dark. Okay, I'm going to dab my brush in water, tap it on the paper towel, and press a little bit and kind of go back and forth. Okay, a little more of the darkest color. Start to add a little bit more shadows in here. Let's use this color, this one and the darkest color. And we're going to go over, even if we go over the lighter parts we added with the moon, that's okay. We want to focus on the reflection and the shadows first. And then we can go back and correct and adjust. So here I'm going to actually use a little bit of this color, this one right here. Maybe mix it with the darkest color a little bit. And then in here, I'm going to go right where we left off. I'm going to add another glaze. Okay, maybe a little bit of a darker color with some white, or with some water, sorry. A little bit of water, and I want to make this area a little bit darker in here on the bottom. I want the glow to be happening right in here. Okay, so I'm going to continue. Let's start with the darkest color again. And I want to kind of focus here on this part. Okay, maybe a little bit more of the darker color. And let's just randomly add it in here, the darkest color. And you'll see, once we start to add another layer, you'll see it's all going to come together nicely. Clean my brush in the water and just use the brush with a little bit damp brush by itself. And I'm going to just go back and forth. So a little more of the darker color in here. Okay, and then I'm gonna use my number 4 brush and add a little bit of color, green color reflections, right? For example, this lighter green, maybe mix it with this grayish green, a little bit of both. And then I'm gonna reflect a little bit of the land, for example, right here. I'm gonna reflect a little bit of it, not too much. We don't want it to be perfect. Right? Something like this. And then obviously reflect your branches, maybe even go lighter. So maybe use a little bit of a lighter green. Maybe this one, randomly. And we're gonna, with your damp brush, we're gonna try to reflect some of this. Dab it in the water and tap it on the paper towel. And I know it looks messy right now, but you'll see. You'll see once we add a little more detail. So just randomly add, remember, reflecting that. So a little bit more. Dab it in the water so it won't be too intense, and then press a little bit. To take away the sharpness of the highlight. And maybe there's a little bit of grass and things in the water. So use any green shade. Maybe there's a little bit of lighter little rocks and little details that we don't see. I'm going to use the darkest color, any darker color on the bottom. Just add it there gently. I'm going to reflect some of the rocks here. So I'm going to use this grayish green and this one. Randomly mix those two together and just eyeball it right. Something like this. And if you overdid it, you can always correct later with a darker color. It's fine. The more details you have in your water, the better it looks, the more interesting it looks. So don't be afraid to keep adding and adding until you're happy with it. So maybe a little bit of a lighter color here. There's some bushes, remember, reflecting from this bush, happening probably right in here. So I'm going to add a randomly add some greens, reflections, maybe a darker color. You know, eyeball it, get an idea. And it does not have to be exactly perfect because it's all blurry in the water anyways. And then with your flat brush, you can go ahead and start to add some lighter highlights. Maybe use this light green and mix it with this color. Okay, we're going to add some ripples and things like that. So maybe a little bit less bright. Right where the land meets the water, we're going to have a bright highlight. Okay, and in here as well. Okay, add a little more lighter, for example, right here. Right? And have fun with this. Take your time. Don't rush it. Now I'm going to use titanium white, right, a little bit in my flat brush with some water. You just do the same thing, but let's start with the moon. And of course you can really make some of these brighter. Right? All right, so you can continue working and making it soft, going back and forth like I showed you, right? And this is, if you want to take a break, this is a good time to take a break. But if you want to continue painting, just work on making it as clean as you want and as much of shadows as you want, right? So I'm going to take a break here and come back, and we're going to mix some more colors and finalize this painting by adding details. All right, so now we're going to mix some colors and finalize this painting. So for our grass and some reflections of the grass into the water, we added a thumb amount of white and a little bit of viridian and medium yellow. And then less white, more viridian and more medium yellow. And then less white than this one. And then more viridian and more medium yellow, phthalo blue and lemon black. And then just phthalo blue and lemon black by itself. I'm going to mix these, and with the last color here, I'm going to take part of it, like this much, and mix it with the last one. And finally, for our darkest color, lamb black by itself, and we're going to take part of this color, a little bit of this one, and mix it with the darkest color. And now we're going to mix some colors for our highlights of the tree. And it's going to look a little bit like more leaning towards like the gray color instead of green. So I added a little bit of white, and white by itself straight out of the tube. This will be for the moon, the brightest reflection on our water, and by itself. And then here I added a small amount of white, and then I'm going to take part of this color right here. All right, it has a little bit of green, but not too much. And I'm going to quickly mix that in and get it like a grayish color, grayish green blue color. That'll be our highlight of the tree right here. Okay, Finally, we're going to add a little bit of white, similar amount, and phthalo blue, and we're going to also take part of this color right here, all right, and mix it with this blue, phthalo blue. And I want this color leaning towards more of the grayish light blue instead of green. This will be for the water details in case we need to go over some areas, right, with this lighter. And we can actually create a darker blue for like when you go in here, right? And actually I'm going to do that just in case. This is just in case if I need to correct or adjust, right, into my water right here, right? So basically I'm going to add another little bit of white, very small amount, because this one's going to be a little bit of a darker color, and then more phthalo blue. Okay, so something like this, and this time I'm going to take the darkest color right here, a little bit of that with my palette knife. And the reason why I do that is because if I just use color straight out of the tube, it's going to look too blue or too vibrant. But when you add a little bit of black, it kind of makes it more neutral, takes away a little bit of the brightness of the color, right? Vibrancy of it. It makes it look a little more grayish, because at night things are more like dim. They're not as, you know, bright in color as during the day. Okay, so this is perfect. Okay, so you could see something like this and you'll be good to go. All right, so let's start with working from the furthest distance and detailing everything as we get closer. So with my detail brush, I'm going to add some more trees, more details, so that it won't look, you know, just plain by itself. So it'll have some character and detail to it. So with this color, right, this one, right, it's not the darkest. This is the darkest color. This has a little more blue in it, right? But it is pretty dark. With my detail brush and some water, I'm going to add some details. For example, right here. So I'm going to dab my brush in water, and you see it's still pretty dark, so I'm going to actually mix it with a little bit of blue. Make it less dark. I don't want it to be too dark. I just want a hint showing through. That's much better. And I'm going to just fade it out. Okay, so with a little bit of this light blue and this one, get an in-between color, we're going to add and just kind of fade it out. Create little branches like this. Starting to add a little more detail, right? And then on there behind, there will be you can almost see it. Okay, very small amount. We don't want to overdo it. I'm going to blend it in here. A little bit of that darker shadow, so it won't be too intense. Okay. Same thing here. And fade it out. We're not going to do too much inside here, but I want to add a little bit of darker shadow right here. Okay, similar idea. I'm going to add some on this side of the tree. Randomly. Okay. More water. less paint. We're going to add a little bit of a darker shadow in here. So a little bit more. Some separations. Not too much. Still, I want to keep it looking misty, but these little details makes it look a little bit more, makes our tree stand out a little more. Gives it more depth. Okay, and then I'm going to continue adding a little bit on this side. So a little bit of this dark one and the blue one with my detail brush. Just going to randomly actually use a little bit more of a darker color as you go in. As you could tell, it gets a little darker, right? So we want to create a little bit of a darker. That's much better. Randomly. And it's okay if you go over your big trees. We're going to go over them with a dark color again. So mainly this color now. You could even make them a little thicker, bigger, because they're closer to us now. But we're just adding a few. We're not doing too much. And once you're done here, right, you can barely see it. Let it be faded. We still want to make it look misty. And with your number 4 brush, you can adjust, make sure it's damp. You can adjust by adding a little bit of a, for example, a darker kind of fade on some of these, not everywhere. And now we can do the same kind of idea. Let's use our number 4 brush to go over these trees again, basically with the darkest color. Well, let's start with this one, maybe a little bit of a darker color, not too much, a little less. Let's just use this one because this is still in the back. And I'm just going to add some shadows inside my tree here. Okay, and focus on creating a little bit of shadows like we did right there on the bottom with this color and my number 4 brush. And you could even connect some of these, you know, to create variety. But it would be something like this. Okay. Same thing with these trees. I'm going to use the darkest color because they're the closest, and add another layer and go over all my trees up close here. Okay, and then you can connect some of these like this. Try to create a smoother transition. Create some shadows, right? So it won't just look flat, you know, straight down. You want to create some separations. Okay. So once you're done with that, then we can use the lightest color, or one of the lightest colors that we mixed, and go over our highlights again. Okay, so we can use our flat brush, and remember this color right here, with some water. We're gonna basically do the same thing, go over and create some brighter highlights. Okay, and you can add as much as you want. Skip some areas and do the same thing on this one. And this is just now the detailing part, right? So this is like the fun part, and it takes time, and you can adjust and correct the shapes of your trees and things like that, right? So have fun with this. It's basically using these colors and playing around back and forth until you are happy with your shadows and your highlights and things like that. And you could add a little bit of highlight on the right side of this tree, just a very little one. And you can use your detail brush too if you wanted to. Right? Totally up to you. Very little, not too much. We don't want them to stand out too much. We still want to make it look faded. See, that's too much. Okay. You can always correct and adjust using your darker colors if you wanted to dim down a bit. But you get the idea. And now you can use your detail brush, basically going over with your darker colors, whatever one. For example, this color you can work on with your detail brush, adding your branches here, making them stand out a little bit more, right? So take your time on this and add as much as you want. Right? So I'm showing you guys quickly, but you get the idea. Totally up to you how much little branches you want to add. Once you're done with that, we can now work on our grass. So we'll start with the lightest color. Let's just add our brightest areas first. And I'm going to use my number 8. You could use your number 4 too. But let's use our number 8. And add your brighter areas where the light is hitting the grass first. And now we're just adding another layer on top, and it's going to fade. That'll make it look more detailed. Okay, so a little bit more of the brighter ones in here maybe. Okay, and then same thing here. Add a few brighter ones from the glow of the light. And then you can kind of go like this, gently pressing and pulling it upwards to create some grass effect. And you can also dab to switch it up. And as you go in, it's going to be less bright. So then you can go maybe to your darker green. You could add a little bit of that darker green, maybe mix it with this darkest blue and go back in here. Actually, let's use this one. Add a little bit of green in here. Once you're done with that, like we have here, a little bit of green reflecting in the water from this area and from this tree, right? We want to reflect a little bit of that green also. So I'm going to use a little bit of this, maybe mix it with this grayish blue so it won't be too strong. And then we're going to start to reflect a little bit of it onto the water. Okay. It will be very small amount. It's not going to be too much. We don't want to add a lot. We just want to add a little bit of the green reflecting, very small amount. Right, like this. You can skip some areas. Maybe as it goes in, it gets a little darker, right? So randomly, gently with your damp brush, add a glaze of green. Okay. You can even go over this area, make it a little brighter. You get the idea. And of course, we're going to reflect the best we can. A little bit of green here. It's not going to be as clean as, you know, the top of our. Bring the paint a little bit down. Maybe make it a little lighter so it won't be too perfect. Okay, that's much better. All right, so same idea. We're gonna switch to our number 4. I'm gonna quickly reflect. Let's use a little bit of a darker color, maybe mix these two together. And let's just use this real quick to remember the highlights of our tree, to quickly go over and try our best to somewhat reflect it. Remember, we don't want to make it perfect. We just want to reflect a little bit of the tree so that it'll, because the water looks like it's moving and choppy, right? So we don't want to make it look like it's just still water. That's why I'm not worried about making it too perfect, but I'm eyeballing it and trying to get the best I can. Adding a little bit of the brighter highlights. And of course, we could do the same thing with our darkest color. Let's use the darkest, maybe a little bit of this one so it won't be. And go over your reflections. Maybe add a little bit of that dark where the grass is. Bring it down a bit. Okay, same thing here. I'm going to add a little bit of more darker tones. Add a little bit of a darker transition. Okay, and so now you can make it even, you know, some of these areas, I want to make it a little softer, less lines, because there's a lot of little lines that I added, and make it a little bit more on the blue side. I'm just going to glaze it with water and gently go back and forth and take away some of these sharp looking lines. So maybe a little bit more of this blue. Gently with water. I want to take away some. Of these. And even if you go over your, you know, reflection, that's okay, because we are going to correct it and make it look cleaner, you know. So I'm going to just add that glaze of that light blue, or this one, with water, right? And just go over one more time. Dab it in the water. Let's use a little bit more lighter color. So I'm gonna actually use a little bit more blue. So to do that, I'm gonna use white. I'm not gonna add any more paint. I have plenty, just white, and then this blue, the darkest blue, mix those together, and that'll give you a lighter blue than this one, because I want it to be a little bit of a little bit more darker blue, a little bit more leaning towards blue just for this part. And that's how I adjust and fix things. And don't worry about trying to, you know, if you're scared of making mistakes, this is actually better. When you're adding more layers, there's going to be a bunch of color transitions, which is really good for the painting. It won't look flat, or it won't look too fake, or even go over some of the green areas right here, for example, right? With the lighter blue, I'm going to go over and add a little bit of that smooth look, smooth little blue. Ripple here, so it won't look all just black here, right? So a little more white and blue. I want to make this a little lighter here, because remember, the glow of the moon next to it, it's going to be lighter. It's not going to be darker. Just go back and forth, even if you cover your, that's okay. And then as it goes down, it's going to get a little darker, as you could tell, right? So that's how you work and fix and create your reflections and things like that. You know, you just play with color, bring this rock reflection down. Some of these reflections a little bit darker. So I'm going to use a little bit of this blue and the darkest color we've mixed, and try to clear some of these. Like we did right here, right? We're going to make some of these so it won't just look perfectly reflected, right? We just want some of these to be a little bit more covered. And of course you can go back and forth, maybe add a little bit of dark just on some of them, but you get the idea. All right, and you can go back with your number or flat brush and with your white, right? We're gonna go back and try to create a light, smooth reflection. Okay, and I'm gonna spend some time working with these, maybe this color as well. And I'm going to work on trying to make it even smoother transition from, so it won't look just white here, right? We're gonna maybe use a little bit of this darker blue right here. And I'm gonna try to spend some time and make it look a little gentle transition from this light going into the colors out. Okay. So I'm going to spend some time finalizing it and detailing it, going back and forth on the water, on my reflection. I don't want to overdo it. I want to keep it soft looking. Mainly, I want this to, basically the goal is to create a light and then transition out to the blue so it won't look too intense, just the white, right? So I'm going to spend time working on, with my number 4, number 8, on the grass, on the little branches, the reflections, and, you know, trying to make it a little, and add the dark area in here where the land. Right? So that can stand out a little more. And finally, I'm going to add some highlights. For example, right here, I'm going to use this color, maybe a little bit of green into it, this gray green, with my detail brush and some water. Something like this. We're going to add bright highlights to our rocks, making them look a little bit more cleaner. And then you can try to reflect some of it, not too much. Just some of it down, for example, right here. Right? So this is like the final details I'm adding to my painting. And I'm not gonna add too much. So this rock, I want it to be pretty bright. Some of the flatter rocks in here. You get the idea. Okay, I'll be done for today. You can spend as much time as you want in any part playing with these colors here. And I also did add a few more rocks here for fun. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Thank you guys for tuning in. Please be sure to like and subscribe and stay tuned for more. Take care and God bless.